Dr. John Demartini is a human behavioral specialist and founder of the Demartini Institute, a private research and education institute dedicated to activating leadership and human potential. He's an international author and business consultant, working with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, celebrities, and sports personalities. Globally, he's worked with individuals and groups across all markets.
As you know, Donald Trump is elected in America. So, first of all, what do you think about the election? Because I love the way you see the world about balanced perspective, and that's why I decided to interview you about this topic. We can see a lot of frustration in the world, and I love to hear your wisdom.
Well, it's a broad question, but I was watching the bantering and the battling going on between them very intermittently because of my schedule, because I've been very intense schedule for weeks now. So I haven't kept up with every detail, but it seemed like she was going to win just a week or so before, and then all of a sudden some stuff came out on her with the FBI, which then threw her back. And even though that happened, I didn't really expect that to stop her from winning. I assumed she might win, primarily because of the unknowns dealing with Donald. And he's a businessman, an entrepreneur, and a celebrity in the form of TV, but he's not an experienced politician. But apparently the American society has been more interested in making change, and they believe that things he stated are what they're wanting, obviously, and that her coming into office would be more of the same old thing. And he has, I guess you could say, downgraded her with everything he's brought out to try to negate her. And so it made them skeptical. I still didn't think that he was going to win, even down to the last bit. I thought that she might come through at the last minute, because they released her from the FBI issues. Now, I know that Donald is he's bright, very intelligent. I've had the opportunity to have conversations with Donald on a number of occasions. One, because we lived inside the building underneath him. We lived on the 62nd floor at Trump Tower, and I would see him in the elevator actually quite often. And we had conversations, some brief, some longer. And we've also had the opportunity to speak on conferences. So I've had chats with him in the green rooms at conferences and this kind of thing. I also know his wives. My wife and his wives, two of them anyway, were interactive. The particular one with Ivana. We used to live next door to them, in fact, at that time. So there's been some interaction with him. I've seen him very focused and very centered and very attentive and very mature in his behavior. And inspiring conversation. I've also seen him ranting and running rackets and playing emotions, as you see very commonly in the election. But I also believe that that is a strategy that he's chosen to play in order to get elected, which apparently worked. Now the question is, will he settle down and get grounded and play that part of himself to run the government? Because that is partly what's going to be required. You can't just keep ranting and not delivering. You have to deliver. And that's the thing that we'll all have to wait and see, because I don't know what's going to happen. I have seen some interviews recently that were not as inspiring as I would hope he would play, because he made some statements that were counterbalancing what he once said. So it's defeating what he once said. So there's incongruencies there. And that the media will capture, and so will the public play on it and go viral. So they'll pick on him. How he handles that and how he stabilizes that once he gets into office will be a question. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we'll all have to wait. But I know he has the capacity to pull things together and play, diligent. I've seen him in speeches do that. But whether or not he's got he made a statement the other day that this is a big job, it's an overwhelming job, but he's for it, he's going for it. So the idea that he's even perceiving it that way um, would be a humbled statement, but at the same time create a curiosity which could fluctuate the economic markets if people don't feel he's clear and certain. That's one thing that Obama did. No matter what he did in speaking, he didn't throw himself into emotional responses. He kept his articulation. Donald is a little bit more volatile in his approach and a little bit more outspoken and doesn't mind hearing himself speak about whatever his opinion is, which could be challenging when it comes to negotiation and interaction and international negotiations and business deals. So I wish we had a crystal ball, but my sense is that it's going to be an interesting beginning. When he goes in there, he's going to have to learn a lot. I think what Obama said the other day, that you're going to have to settle down and get your act together, is a real thing. I mean, he's going to have to make sure he plays it, because you can't rant and rave in international politics. I mean, I've been in some governments and talked to some people in government in different countries, and they're not interested in that. They're interested in getting the job done. They don't mind after the job's done having conversations and things, but they're not interested in autocratic, manipulative behavior. So I think it'll be a learning curve for Donald. I think the world will have a learning curve watching it, because it'll be a reality TV show on a global scale. But I think that, what can you say? The worst thing that can happen is he'll create chaos, and they'll impeach him, and they'll get somebody else in there, and we'll have an adventure, and we'll stir up the U.S. government for a while and shake up the markets around the world. That's the worst thing that can happen. But nature already will counterbalance that and bring solutions to that. I always say that whatever crisis is there, there's always a solution to it. So I have a feeling he's going to have a learning curve. He's going to grow. He's going to actually be a different person if he does stay in there for a whole term. We'll see a much more mature, responding individual by the time he's through that, because you can't be a president without having to learn a lot and learn how to negotiate a lot and learn how to communicate a lot. I mean, it'll be an education for him. We will all grow from this adventure, and that's an adventure.
Yes, and some people were afraid about Donald Trump because of his ideas about Muslim and religions, and some people were afraid that we could make a choice like Hitler elected the election of Hitler. So how do you know when you elect someone like him if he will kill thousands and millions of people, or if it's just a strategy to be elected? So what do you think about this kind of fear?
Well, I don't know of anybody that has escaped or transcended completely subjective bias. I don't know of anybody who has walked the path of the mean, as some of the great philosophers has depicted, without having volatilities and emotions based on things that challenge or support their values. There's favoritism inside every human being. Even within your own family, no matter how hard a parent tries, there's sometimes favoritism cycles that go on in family dynamics. So he's probably going to have his biases, like almost everybody. Can he contain them and use them wisely in his communications? That's to be seen. I know that some of the things he said, I feel really certain that some of the things he said was to stir up things to get votes. I know that he has his biases, and he will have to grow through those biases, and that could be some of his temporary downfalls, and he will learn, and he'll have to learn quick if he does. But it also, there's, as Machiavelli says, you have to err the saint and the sinner, and you have to be the hero and the villain if you want to lead large organizations. And you have to be able to play both sides, be able to say yes and no, and be nice and mean and kind and cruel. You have to play both sides in order to get things done. My sense is his statements will eventually be mitigated by his own learning process, and he'll realize that if it's not working, he'll have to backstep and come in with a slightly different angle. I have a confidence that he will figure out a way of solving those reactions that he initiates, but it'll be a learning curve for him. because he's used to being outspoken in business. He just outspoken and just does things. When he deals with social structure, it's not quite as easy as let's sue the person and shut him down and let's go over here now. You're now going to deal with world social media coverage, and so he's going to have his disciplining. And I think he'll learn it. He'll be slow in learning some of it probably, and others faster. But he's going to have a learning curve. You can't go in there as a rodeo star riding horses and taking on the bucking of a horse, and take that on to governments and international negotiations, and ride it like a cowboy. You have to learn how to negotiate and communicate, and that's going to be his growth process.
So, do you think it's impossible to, not with Donald Trump, but in the future, to have someone like Hitler in the government to take the power and kill people in the world? And what do you think about?
Well, I don't think that Donald. I think using an analogy of Hitler, I think would be going to extreme. Although I don't know if anybody who might be watching this has ever seen The Greatest Story Never Told. But The Greatest Story Never Told is a 27-part series on Adolf Hitler. I encourage every human being to watch that has an emotional charge on Adolf Hitler, because I think that it gives a more balanced, objective view on his life and puts things into a broader perspective than the narrow-minded accusations that are usually founded by certain religious groups or social groups. Not that I'm a proponent or a promoter of Adolf Hitler, but I'm just saying it gives more of an objective view, a more broader view, so it helps people see things. When you do, you see you don't see just the biased story about him. You see all the story, every part of him. Well, not every, but majority of part of him. With Donald, I don't think he's going to eliminate a culture or a genocide or any of those type of things. I think that's not Donald. Donald, believe it or not, has got a sensitive part.
So, in your case, you feel it, you know it. When I listen to you, it's clear for you that it's not the same thing. But some people are afraid of that, and they don't have the clarity to feel if it's only a strategy or a new Hitler.
Well, I don't think I wouldn't put Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump in the same category by any means. Donald is
Why?
Well, because Adolf Hitler was a mystic. He studied under a esoteric group by Helena Blavatsky. He in that belief system by Helena Blavatsky, in her doctrine, secret doctrine, and ISIS unveiled text, they believed, falsely, with incomplete knowledge, but of the times it was relatively up to date, in a series of races of human beings. They had a thing called the Polian race, the Hyperborean race, the Lemurian race, and the Atlantean race, and then the Aryan race. Now, these have not been anthropologically or archaeologically shown evidence in the way they described it in the text that she wrote. But in esoteric circles, she had an influence on his thinking and was part of a secret society that he was involved in. And he was attempting to follow what she had said to try to create the pure Aryan stock, the fifth root race.
So you are saying that he did that because of a strong belief?
He did it because of a strong belief in something that was erroneous and incomplete, but at the time was not known to be that way. And it was believed that there was a superior race in the society. And so he was trying to do, in a sense, eugenics and trying to create a superior culture like they did with plants and animals and horses and every other kind of species. So they thought they would do that with human beings. That was not really far-fetched if you put all the context in place that he was around at the time.
So in his head, we can say that it was like one of his purpose to create a new race.
An advanced culture.
Yes.
Now, the belief that according to her text, the Semites were part of the third root race and partly of the fourth root race, but not the fifth root race. So he felt that was that. He also had a charge, according to the movie, a charge against the banking system that was governed by some of the Jewish leaders. So there were a number of factors that in there that you rarely hear about unless you do a little probing that were all instrumental in him taking on those roles. So he was also dedicated to women and women's rights and many other things in other areas. So there's both sides to him, but we don't see all of it unless we see the movie or really go and probe into his life. Donald, on the other hand, I don't think he's vulnerable to such an extreme ideal about anthropology by any means. So he's not, the probability of some sort of ethnic cleansing or genocide or whatever is just not even not even worth even discussing. That's silly. But the idea of him learning how to appreciate the various cultural and particularly religious ideologies will be a challenge for him, I'm sure. He probably has his own belief, and like anybody, the more rigid you are in your belief, the more difficult it is to listen and communicate with other people. And he's going to be forced, in some respects, to stay in position. He's going to be forced to have to learn how to communicate and negotiate and work with that and break through his own stuff. And if he has problems with that, he'll get help. I have no doubt he'll seek help, possibly even someone in my category that might actually be of assisting to help him resolve his issues so he can negotiate and clear it. So, because any area of your life that you're infatuated with or resentful runs you don't run it. You're a creator when you can love something enough to be able to not react to it and to be able to guide it. And so if he finds that he's having an emotional reaction, that's nice for getting elected, but that's not going to work in the real presidency. So he's going to end up having to mitigate those volatilities. He's going to have to learn how to get experts and surround himself with experts to assist him in the art of communicating. And most presidents have speech writers that will help them that. And he'll have to put a team together. He'll build a team of people that will help him accomplish what's going on, what's necessary. That's my sense he'll do. And yeah, but his particular charges and biases will be his downfall. In the 48 Laws of Power, it was very beautifully stated that anybody that can't manage their emotions can't manage their life. Warren Buffett said, don't expect to manage money till you manage emotions. And many people have stated that through the centuries. So he will learn, if he has emotions, to think instead of feel and react, and think and be objective and learn how to act wisely. You cannot be a president without being forced to have to do that, or you don't sustain the presidency. And I don't think he wants to let that go. So he will figure it out. He'll have to figure it out, or they'll impeach him.
Thank you for all these answers.
I don't think the American government or the American people, if we thought in America that he was going to completely undermine the country, there would be extreme riots, there'd be impeachment proceedings, there would be things happening very quickly, within days. So he's going to be on the reality TV show's about to begin. He's going to be on view by the people around the world, particularly in America, to see if he now delivers at least a portion. No politician ever delivers everything. They go in there and they're dealing with oppositions, and they're going to deliver the best they can with what the circumstances are in. And most politicians have pollsters to identify what people think they want and then present to them what they want to get elected. That's just part of the game. But once they get in there, they have to face the reality of what they're up against, and they've got a bicameral, bipartisanship government, which is essential for regulation. And he will then have to toe the line and figure out how to communicate, or he'll get a fight. And if he tries to think he can just call a lawyer and sue them, that's not going to work in the U.S. government. So he'll end up mastering the process, I'm sure, in the process. He'll have to.
Thank you very much for this answer. In another topic about war and peace, you say, if I understand correctly, that there is a balance between war and peace in the world, and it's something hard for people to understand, accept that no matter what they do, they will have it will have war and peace. So can you explain your point of view about war and peace, and the idea that if it's balanced, so do we have to do something, or do we have to let things happen and just accept everything?
Well, I was speaking at a peace and conference in Austria, and I asked the room, how many of you in the room, there were 200 leaders there and specialists there from around the world trying to solve 6 problems in the world. And one was hunger, one was food production, one was water, in other words, one was sustainable economics, things of this nature. And I asked the group, how many of you have moments of inner calm and inner peace? And the whole room put their hand up pretty quick, because that's expected. And I smiled and I said, now how many of you have moments of inner turmoil and inner conflict within yourself? And everybody looked around at each other and were afraid to put their hand up at first because they're at a peace conference. And they're afraid to put the truth hand up. And I said, well, I certainly do. I certainly have moments of calm and turmoil. And I've spent 44 years of my life learning how to master my life to the best of my ability. And I still have both of those experiences. And when I said that because I was the teacher that day, or the speaker, that gave them permission to relax and open up, and the hands started going up until eventually all the hands went up. And it would be almost a lie, an outright lie, to state that they never have turmoil. So they didn't want to do that either. And they had demonstrated turmoil in the conference on a number of occasions, so it was easily obvious that would be there. And so I had them agree that there was moments of calm and moments of turmoil inside themselves. So that means they have peace and war within themselves. And I'm sure if anybody's listening, they can think of both of those moments in their life. And then I said, when you finally find a mate and you get your spouse or date, would you agree that you have nothing but peace? And of course, everybody started laughing because they knew that wasn't so. But I said, but would you agree that there are moments of peace and calm when you're with your mate? And they all put their hands up. And I said, how many of you have moments of turmoil and conflict and arguments with your mate? And slowly but surely they went up and they all started laughing because they knew that was pretty tragic in their life because they all had conflicts with their mate. And so I had now the first dynamic, the individual. The second dynamic was now the family, the mother and father, husband and wife. And then I said, now when you make love and you procreate and you have a new child, would you agree that you have moments of peace and cuddling and it's very gentle and sweet? And they all put their hands up. I said, would you also have moments when the baby's crying and there's arguments and it's screeching and you just want to, pull your hair out and everything else? And everybody put their hand up this time. And they go, absolutely. Particularly when it's crying and there's sometimes peace and war. And I said, so can you see in your family, when you have children, particularly if you had more children, there's times of calm and turmoil, peace and war? They go, yes. There's cooperation and there's competition and arguments and things of this nature. Because it's been shown biologically that maximum growth and development occurs at the border of order and chaos, support and challenge, peace and war. It's been shown biologically that way. That's why we have predator and prey, or prey and predator in a food chain. We need both. The border of order and chaos has been known in ecological systems and evolutionary models for a long time now. Since I was in my 30s, 20s. So that's not new. Now, when you get with your family and you get with your closest relatives, your uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews, and things, at a family reunion, I jokingly said, so how many would agree at that moment? They're already laughing. How many agree that there's nothing but peace? And they all laughed. I said, well, would you agree that there's moments of peace and calm and getting along and getting together? Maybe when somebody's speaking or something and they're acknowledging, there's that. But then there's also moments when they have, God, I would never raise my kids like that. Oh my God, the way those people do it, they're idiots. There's challenges and there's support inside that family dynamic that's extended. And so everybody agreed at this peace conference. Then I asked, at work, would you agree that there's moments of calm and everybody's working together and there's peaceful things? They go, yes. Would you agree there's also times when there's conflict and disagreements and competitions and fighting going on and arguments going on? We can see that in Apple, in Steve Jobs' life, he had it. Paul Allen and Microsoft and them, they have it. They all admit it. There's nobody that doesn't admit that. Even the evangelical preachers like Billy Graham admitted he had that in internal conflicts and peace, and he had these two sides. Mother Teresa in her memoirs has it. Gandhi has it in his memoirs, I assure you. So nobody escapes this. Now that we're at the corporate level, now I said let's go down to a higher social dynamic. Let's go to um, let's go first. Let's go to a home association meeting where you have a local community, and I guarantee you, anybody who's had a home association meeting, even in Trump Tower, in the tower, when they'd gather together with all the residences, we'd have peace and war. And home associations have nice examples of this because they have different opinions. Because there's a law called the law of heuristic escalation that states that whenever somebody tends to project their values autocratically or self-righteously onto another group of people, an equal and opposite force of opposite opposers with different opposite sets of values come in to counterbalance it to keep it in check. And that's the beauty of our bicameral American structure. And so that's called the law of heuristic escalation. And politics know, if they're smart, they know this law, and they use it to their advantage if they're smart. If not, they get humbled by it. And so I kept raising the dynamics until it eventually got to home associations, and then it went into the mayoral, and then the government and the governor, and then it goes up. And I went up until I eventually had them all saying, yes, yes, there's just times of peace and times of war. And then I made the statement at the very end. I said, so where does world peace come in? When no individual, no family, no community, no city, no state has any history of it. So it's an idealism that is actually childish, usually initiated by people who have not appreciated the conflicts in their family and thought they had a dysfunctional family and were always trying to escape it, looking for a one-sided world, and not appreciating how much challenge is necessary for innovation, creativity, learning how to communicate, growth. Precocious independence occur when you challenge children. Juvenile dependence occurs when you oversupport them and protect them. You need a combination of both to grow, and society needs both to grow. And peace and war are another way of saying support and challenge on a global scale. And the evolution of peace and war, if we look at it through history, anthropologically, you'll see it started out where we had peace and war within a nomadic couple, hunter and gatherer. And then when we finally started having seeds and agriculture, we started having it in kinships and townships and eventually in cities. And cities would be at peace within and fight outside. That's why they had walls around them. And then they eventually went to states and then nations. And finally, we had the first global war in the 20th century.
So the
we will eventually have, if we ever find another colony out there, or we colonize, we'll probably have conflicts in space. So I don't think it's realistic to assume you're supposed to have one without the other. I think it's delusional. Even Einstein, who initially reacted with Oppenheimer about the nuclear, the detriment of nuclear weapons, he went to join a peace movement and eventually went against it with Freud and said, you know, this is wasting our time. Let's get real about this and put these things back into balance. So I don't like to promote a fantasy of one-sidedness, because I always say that depression is a comparison of your current reality to a fantasy you keep getting addicted to. I think it's wiser to set realistic expectations that people all have different values. You're going to learn how to expand and broaden your own ability to communicate your values in terms of those values. Sometimes you'll be effective, sometimes less effective. You'll have communication and discommunication. You're going to have sometimes agreements and disagreements. It's wise to mitigate those by mastering the art of caring enough about humanity to find out all their cultural value systems, master the art and skills of communicating. And I believe that Donald's going to have to master that, or he will create temporary conflicts that will have to be eventually calmed down.
Okay, a last short question about that. When I take, for example, my couple, at the beginning of the couple, the war and peace was bigger, and the more we live together, the more we manage to manage peace and war quicker and easier. So do you believe that in, for example, 1,000 years there is war and peace, but the way we manage it is more quick?
Well, war and peace are conserved through time and space as an evolutionary driving force. Inside your body, you have what is called anabolic pathways and catabolic pathways. One is initiated by the parasympathetic nervous system, one's initiated by the sympathetic nervous system. The anabolic is usually by night, the other one's by day. And you have mitotic and apoptotic behavior, building and destroying. You have neuroplasticity, which is building and destroying. Osteoplasticity, which is building and destroying. Soft tissue, building and destroying. Your whole body is remodeling itself and building and destroying so it can adapt to changing environments. It needs to. Otherwise, it would not function. Society has to build and destroy. 99% of all species that have ever lived on the planet are gone. Extinction's a part of it, but with that comes originations and new adaptable species to new environments. And ecosystems show that there's extinctions of species. Even in social systems, there's extinction of species of humans, and there's also extinctions of businesses. Peter Drucker in his work on business showed that you have to have death of businesses to grow bigger businesses that are more efficient. So there's going to be build and destroy, and that is part of the nature. Transformation and evolution depends on it. If you build a city like Paris, and they never allowed any buildings to be destroyed, and they were never allowed to be remodeled and upgraded, it would not keep up with it. You would have stagnation. It wouldn't keep up with the evolutionary system. It has to be able to be remodeled, and the rate of that will be curtailed if it's not allowed to. So we need build and destroy. We need creative destruction and destructive creation as an evolutionary force to have resiliency and adaptation. When we're objective and reasonable in our manners, the extremes of build and destroy become more centered. When we're subjectively biased, they become more extreme. So the wiser the individual is, the more we mitigate the extremes and learn how to communicate and dialogue in a dialectic with arguments like, intelligent arguments. But build and destroy will occur in economics. A country can rise, another one will fall. It'll occur in religious constructs. It'll occur in mortality and fertility rates. Peace and war is going to show up in football and baseball and sports, competing in winners and losers. You're going to have that in the stock market. If there's any derivatives at all, you're going to have a non-zero sum game and a zero sum game, where you're going to have winners and losers and income inequalities. Build and destroy is part of nature. And I think that anybody who can't see that has to be blind. And they have to be very rigid. The narrower the mind, the more you see one-sidedness as a fundamentalist with a blind, unconscious mind. The broader you are, the more you integrate the conscious and unconscious and see both sides and embrace it. So a real leader has to embrace both sides of themselves, both sides of other people, and learn how to communicate in a way where they support people to open them up or challenge people to get actions. You have to master both. So I'm a firm believer that even 1,000 years from now, we'll be doing that, but we'll be doing it on probably interplanetary levels.
Yes. Do you like the book, The Lucifer Principle?
I haven't read that. I've only heard about it, but I've not read it, so I don't know how to comment about it. But I believe that every human being, if somebody supports you, if I go up to you and I say to you, David, you're always nice, you're never mean. You're always kind, you're never cruel. You're always peaceful, never wrathful. You're always giving, you're never taking. You're always generous, never stingy. You're always positive, never negative. You're always pleasure, never pain. You have a built-in thermostat to know that's a bullshit. And your bullshit meter will go, woo, and say, no, that's not true. If I said to you, you're always mean, you're never kind, nice, you're always cruel, you're never kind, you're always negative, you're never positive, you're always warful, never peaceful, you're always stingy, never generous, you're always negative, you're never positive, your bullshit meter would go, nope, that's not me either. But if I said, David, sometimes you're nice, sometimes you're mean, sometimes you're kind, sometimes you're cruel. In Ecclesiastes 3 in the Old Testament, it basically said there's a time for peace, a time for war, a time for sowing, a time for rending, a time for everything under the sun. The real you has both. I went through the Oxford Dictionary many years ago, page by page, this vast dictionary, thin paper, and circled every human behavioral trait that I could find in a human being. Then I wrote outside that the initials of the people who I thought were the most extreme examples of that behavior. And then I went in and looked in my life and asked, where and when do I display and demonstrate that trait and behavior until I can see it as much as I see in the most extreme examples? I discovered that I had every one of the traits, 4,628 traits I had. There was times when I was nice and mean and honest and dishonest and kind and cruel and giving and taking and narcissistic and altruistic. I played every role at different moments in my life. You don't need to get rid of half of yourself to love yourself. It's when you can love all of that, embrace all that in yourself, then the people around you won't push buttons about you and you won't react. You'll act out of love for people. That's not peace or war. That's an inner peace, embracing the two sides of life without reaction. That I believe is obtainable by an individual through time as they grow, but not a sustainable thing for 7 billion people at any one moment.
Each time you speak about that, I have tears of inspiration. I love the idea of symmetry and balance. Thank you very much, John. I know that you have your skill, so I will ask new questions the next time.
Well, I hope that whoever's listening will be able to glean something out of what was communicated. I would like to say something in that no matter who you are as a president, if you can imagine what you face as a president, it will humble us to, instead of supporting or challenging him only, love the person enough to go, because if you attack him or praise him excessively, you'll probably miss out on doing what will help that president do the greatest service. So the Pygmalion effect has proven this in educational systems. Wise for us now to go, okay, he's selected. We've obviously done that. Now let's learn from that and let's assist him in trying to do the greatest job he can. I personally don't know if I could tackle that job. That's a big job. And so that's why I'm not in that position. So if anybody who's got the courage to go after that job, let's give him at least support and to give him the best shot we got. But I personally think that he'll have his lessons to be learned along the way, as I would if I was in that position. And but I think that hopefully this discussion is of value to whoever's listening. But whoever's listening, please give yourself permission to do something extraordinary on planet Earth, and give yourself permission to believe in the possibilities that you dream inside, and prioritize your life in such a way that you can empower and awaken the natural genius and the natural greatness that you have inside, which everybody has. If we do that, we will contribute by empowering ourselves to help the leaders of the world fulfill their mission, because we're acting wisely and objectively with reason, with service, and we're contributing our genius to the world. That's the greatest thing we can do for them, exemplify what's possible, and that helps our leaders do the same.
I love that. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Appreciate the interview.